There are some taxes that you're never going to see in a government office, and they're invisible, but that doesn't mean that people don't pay them every day. And one of those taxes might be one that you are paying. Most people don't even realize that these taxes exist. Now, if you're chronically online, you might have heard of the terms disability tax, ADHD tax, burnout tax, and things like that. And that is the kind of tax that we're talking about today. The invisible, small things that we pay more of, how to work with them, how to find ways around them, and how to make your life better with or without them. If we haven't met yet, my name is Isabel, and on this channel, we talk all about embracing your weird in order to build a better brand, business, and life. So let's go. So let's define it very simply. These taxes are basically an extra cost that you pay because your brain doesn't work your brain or body doesn't work in the way that society has deemed the standard. Now, that doesn't mean that the standard is the right way. It just is what it is that society defined. So for someone with ADHD, for example, that might look like your veggies rotting in the fridge because you forgot that you bought them and then having to rebuy veggies, right? For someone with disability, it might be having to get an Uber ride because public transport is inaccessible for them. Now, there's also a burnout task, which is one of the sneakiest kinds because it isn't about not being actually able to do something, but more about your brain basically shutting down and telling you you can't do more. So instead of cooking at home for yourself, you might be ordering pizza again because you just don't have the energy to do the cooking task. These taxes drain your bank account just as much as they drain your energy, and they add friction to our lives, or they reduce friction in our lives, but at a cost. And here's why that sucks. Because every time you pay one of these taxes, you feel shame, or you feel guilt, or you feel lazy, or you start judging yourself because you should be able to do what everyone else is doing, and it should be easier, but it isn't. And that guilt and that shame adds up to become an emotional attacker against our own selves. These taxes are not a moral failure. They're not a reflection of you. They're a reflection of a society that isn't built to accept and work with all kinds of brains, all kinds of bodies, and all kinds of people. So this isn't about you. This is about you being able to adapt your life to find something that works for you. The problem is society, not you. So what are the things that we can do about these taxes? Personally, I think there's 3 ways we can deal with them. The first one being my least favorite, which is we just ignore the problem and keep paying the tax anyway. Now, I don't like this one because it basically doesn't deal with the emotional guilt and shame that comes along with the tax. So we're paying not just an extra financial fee, but we're also paying an energy and emotional state. And that doesn't help us, okay? The second option is to find a workaround. Workarounds are about finding a way to avoid paying the tax, even if that way isn't the ideal way. So going back to our ADHD tax example from before, if you're a person who buys veggies and you put them in the veggie drawer in your fridge and you forget that they're there because once out of sight, out of mind, then put them in the door. Now, I know that there's people who are going to watch this and they're going to be like, well, but the door isn't as cold as the rest of the fridge. And if the door isn't as cold as the rest of the fridge, then the veggies are going to go bad faster. And I understand that. And you are correct about that. However, if your veggies are rotting in the drawer because you can't see them, then putting them at the door where you can see them will remind you that they're there. And if they remind you that they are there, that means that you're more likely to eat them, which means less of them will go to waste. So even though you're technically putting them in a worse spot, it's actually a better spot for your brain. And it will help you pay less of that, I need to rebuy the veggies that rotted in the fridge tax. That is a workaround. Workarounds try to find a way around the tax, right? Another workaround for the veggie issue would be to buy frozen veggies or to buy veggies and freeze them. And I mean, that can take extra amounts of work because some of them you need to cook first and stuff. But if you have them in the freezer, they will last longer. That is a workaround. And again, I know there's some people who are going to say, well, yes, but in the freezer, the vegetables lose some of their properties. Hey, again, yes, you are correct. However, if having frozen veggies means that you will eat more veggies because they don't go bad, that is a good thing, because between no veggies because they rot in the fridge, or some veggies that are in the freezer, even if they have less nutrients, this option is better. And that is what a workaround tries to do. It tries to find a better option. Another workaround would be to buy less veggies and put them kind of in the front of your fridge so that you can see them. But also having less, it does mean that you need to go to the supermarket or deliver or have groceries delivered more often, but it also means that less veggies will go to waste. So again, workarounds. There's millions of them. There's 1,000 ways to work around the different taxes that we can have in our lives, but it's all about finding the way that works best for you. And we talked about this last video, incremental upgrade is an upgrade. It is an up level, and it is better than doing nothing and ignoring the problem. Now let's talk about option 3, which is kind of the opposite of workarounds, and it's actually leaning into the tax. Leaning in requires you paying a smaller version of the tax in order to avoid paying the bigger tax later. So what do I mean by this? Let's say that you've been ordering in a lot of food because you can't bring yourself to cook. Now, for example, this year I've had something with my burnout going on happen a lot, which is my brain does not want to peel garlic. I just do not want to do it. It sounds tedious, it sounds annoying, and I do not want to do it. Can you guess what I've been doing as a workaround? I have either been buying minced garlic already, or I have been buying whole already peeled garlic cloves, so I only need to use them when I have, but they're already peeled. Now, is that more expensive? Yes. However, what had happened to me is I was buying my head of garlic, I was putting it in the fridge, and I was never peeling it, and it was literally dying in my fridge. So leaning in by paying a little bit more to buy the garlic already peeled was the option that helped me cook more at home again. So I saved money because I stopped ordering in food. And yes, I spent a little more money buying peeled garlic instead of just the garlic head. But in the end, I saved more money. Leaning in requires that. It requires finding a version of the tax that you're willing to pay that is usually lower than the one that you're paying unconsciously. Another workaround for that is I've been another lean in, is I've been using the food processor a lot. So instead of sitting on the cutting board and like chopping up an onion, I'm just throwing it in chunks inside the food processor. Do I get the perfect, beautiful squares that I want? No, I don't. But do I care? No, I don't. Because at the end of the day, what matters to me is the fact that I'm getting a home-cooked meal by making it easier on myself. The third thing is when I do have the energy to cook, I've been doing a double batch or sometimes even a triple batch. Let's say it's Monday, I have the energy to cook dinner today, and I'm gonna make pumpkin soup. I don't know. Instead of making pumpkin soup for that night, I'm gonna make pumpkin soup for at least 3 nights, because the energy it's gonna take me to make for one portion is the same as it would be to make 3 portions. Maybe it's a little bit more exhausting, but it's not that much different, okay? And then what I do with the extra portions is I freeze them. And so when I don't want to cook, I already have meals in the freezer that are home cooked. Yes, it might take a little bit more effort to make a little bit more soup because you have to chop up a little bit more vegetables, but I don't have to start the task from scratch. I don't have to use a pot and wash the pot again. I don't have to take out all the cutting utensils again. And so it does become a way to lean into the task. This one could also kind of be defined as a workaround, right? And make sure that you're paying a lesser version of it. Now, why did I put this in leaning in instead of workaround? It's because you have to buy extra ingredients. So you are paying a version of the task because you're gonna have to buy more of the ingredients that you use, more carrots, more celery, than what you would normally use for making one single soup. But again, in doing that, you are making your life easier in the long run, and you're avoiding paying the tax of ordering food in, which is gonna be more expensive than cooking it yourself. Now, I do wanna make a little privileged statement here. Not everyone has access to the more expensive but easier option. And I don't want anyone to feel bad about that, right? Sometimes it isn't about buying something. Sometimes it isn't about spending more money. It's just about finding the workaround or the way to lean in that works for you. I understand this isn't an option for everyone, but I also know that even if you can't do the ideal version, sometimes there are versions you can do. So going back to that garlic example of having the peeled garlic or the minced garlic, maybe what you need is to invite a friend over and say, hey, I've been really struggling with peeling garlic, which I know sounds dumb, but would you sit with me while I do it? Because sometimes just having a friend to talk to while you're doing that boring task helps. It's called body doubling, like one of the words that people call it. So check that out. Maybe it's about asking for help, right? Having that friend ask them, hey, I want to make a triple batch of pumpkin soup tonight. Would you be willing to come over and help me make it? Because I'm really struggling. And if they say yes, maybe instead of making a triple batch, make a quadruple batch, right? So they could take back home half of it with them. There are workarounds and there are ways to lean in, even if you don't have the financial ability to just buy the more expensive and easier option. Now, obviously, if you can do that, that's great. But I do want to acknowledge the privilege that there is in being able to say that. Ways that you can find workarounds or lean in that don't cost any money are moving things to a new place, buying less of something, simplifying a recipe, asking a friend to just body double with you, finding a way to do the tasks that bring you joy. So, for example, listening to your favorite podcast while you cook, or listening to your favorite music while you clean. And finally, just dropping the standard completely. Sometimes that's all that is needed. You think you have to do this perfect thing of going to the gym 1,500 times a week perfectly. Maybe drop the standard. Maybe exercise at home for 15 minutes a day. Sometimes that's what's needed. But all I want you to get from this is I want you to understand that these taxes exist and they're not going to go away anytime soon. As society advances and moves forward, there are more and more solutions to support brains that don't work in the quote-unquote typical way and to support bodies that don't work in the quote-unquote typical way. But for now, we're going to have to learn to live with these taxes. And the only thing we can do is try to pay less of them and try to make our lives easier with them. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love for you to comment below a workaround or a lean-in option that you found to it, something that you were struggling with. It might give someone else who's watching this video a good idea of something they can do in their own lives. And that's a way that we can all support each other as a community. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I make new ones like this every single Friday. This is a smaller channel, so I would really, really appreciate it if you take a second to subscribe. There's a lot of people who come back and watch my videos, but they don't hit that subscribe button, which really helps me reach more people and helps this channel grow. So I would really appreciate it. Until next time, stay wild, stay weird, and I'll see you there.